Well, first, thank you all for being here, and I want to first thank all of the caregivers who have made today possible. So Eric and Kelly have done an amazing job in nurturing and caring for this community, and I also want to give a shout out to the folks at McMinimans and Crystal Ballroom, and all the child caregivers, elder caregivers, folks who gave us rides that make today possible. So my name is Amelia Abreu, and yes, shout out to the caregivers. So my name is Amelia Abreu. I live here in Portland, and I'm a design researcher, and I recently started a school called UX Night School. And I'm in the process of writing a book about the relationship between care and technology. And I'm super excited to be here today because I feel like documentation is one of the areas of praxis where all the theoretical work that I've been thinking about in terms of care and technology comes to fruition in docs. So today I'm going to give you an overview about who I am and why I'm talking about this. And I'm going to argue for a better understanding of care and its economic and social impact in terms of what we do as documentarians. And I'm going to give some examples from my own consulting practice. And I'm going to talk about next steps and possibilities, and we're going to have some discussion. So who am I and why am I talking to you about this? I'm a design researcher, writer, founder of UX Night School. And before this, I was a human-computer interaction researcher. I've been working in and around the tech industry for about 10 years now, and for 5 of that, I've been the primary caregiver to my daughter. And caring for my daughter has been one of the most transformational experiences of my life. It has expanded my perspective in so many ways, and it's made me so much more attuned to the importance of care in everyday life. But in this experience, I've also had a lot of ambivalence about how care is regarded in the making of technology. So I'm going to just go on with this. What is care? What does it mean when I say care? Care is a very broad term. In looking at the academic literature on care, I found definitions and explorations of care ranging from anthropological to medical to bioethics to even civil engineering has a concept of care. But the definition of care that I like the most is from sociology, where we say that care has 3 forms: instrumental, emotional, and informational. Instrumental care is the day-to-day work of what we've experienced here: food, cleaning, shopping. I took my students at UX Night School to tour the Radio Cab Depot right here in Northwest Portland a few weeks ago, and it was very apparent how much caring a taxi driver does in their day-to-day work. Emotional care, I think we're all fairly familiar with, but this is the listening, the counseling, what sometimes gets bundled up as quote-unquote empathy. And this is very much a part of all of our jobs. Who hasn't listened to their coworker when they've had a bad day? Or, validated their boss's lunchtime shopping purchases? Sounds like we all have. And then the last part, and this is something that I think all of us in this room, if we make or deal with documentation, we do every day, which is informational caring. And this is applying knowledge and best practices in the interest of someone else. And documentation is a form of informational caring. So given those definitions, I want to step back and look at the role of care in society at large. Humans, it turns out, require more care than any other species. We have big brains, which allow us to do things like computing and documentation. But in order to achieve this, we have a long on-ramp. Cognitive scientists have shown that we do not have a full capacity for making rational decisions until we're 25 years old, which means up until that point, we require a lot of care. And then it turns out 70% of the population will require long-term care in adulthood. So, any myth we have about being independent, 10x engineers, all of that is reliant on a lot of care at the beginning and the end of our lives. Any independence, any autonomy we have right now is bookended by a lot of care. And not only is care important just in terms of survival of the species, it's also a huge part of our economy. Professional caregiver is predicted to be the largest occupation in the US by the year 2020. It's also, if we look at the economy, 81% of jobs are in the service sector. And this is really hard to grapple with when we work in tech and we think that, technology is powering everything. It turns out that 67% of US economic output is in caring for people, which makes it the largest market for technology. Care also has a global supply chain, and sociologists such as Arlie Hofschild and Raquel Farinas have coined this term called the global care supply chain, meaning that our desire and need for folks to care for our children, folks to work in hospitals, folks to work in restaurants, that this actually has a global supply chain there. And we don't have to go very far before we encounter someone from another country taking care of us. And in technology, we kind of devalue care. I would take that kind of out of the question. We don't think that care is important as other work. Has anyone here worked in a company that had lockdown before releases? This is not a way of working that is very accommodating to care work. Facebook has these cute little pink neon signs that indicate being on lockdown. But if you are stuck in your office for 24 hours a day for 2 weeks leading up to a product release, you can't even walk your dog, much less take your kids to school, take your mom to her doctor's appointments, do all of the things that are very normal human activities. What's more is that in the past few years, with the development of the service economy in the app sphere, with the technologies like Uber, Instacart, we've had this goal of making care invisible, not only as cheap as possible, but as invisible as possible. This is a diagram from the design firm Adaptive Path, which I have a lot of respect for their work. But I find this to be extremely problematic. Let's conceal care. Let's conceal the processes and systems and people who are bringing us groceries, giving us rides, and just make it seem like magic. This isn't good. This is infantilizing, and it's not good for business. And much more is we like to outsource care. In recent weeks, we've had some announcements from Facebook about how, they're going to do a better job of moderating their content. They're going to hire more, they're going to A, invest in artificial intelligence, and B, hire more content moderators. But if we look at work that's already been done on content moderation, such as Adrian Chin's at work in Wired, or Sarah T. Roberts from UCLA, who's done sociological studies of content moderators, there's over 100,000 folks in the Philippines, which is way more than the engineering and on-staff employees of Facebook and Google combined. And so there's a cultural urge we have to make care seem invisible, making us comfortable seem like magic. Where do we go from there? This isn't healthy and it's not sustainable, which is what I'd argue. One of the first things I would argue for is to look critically at who is doing this care work. a few years ago, and this is ongoing, cafeteria workers at Silicon Valley campuses of Intel, Google, and Facebook attempted to unionize. And they they wanted to organize not only because of wages, but because of their own care. Cafeteria workers at Intel were being denied bathroom breaks. And if you look at who is in these positions, who is doing this work, it's majority women and majority black and brown women. Meanwhile, if we look at I don't think anyone needs an introduction to the lack of diversity in employee ranks at tech companies, where it's largely male, largely white, and largely very well paid. And is it that our diversity problem in tech is really a care problem? I think that we need to think about this. So, I'd like to propose a few axioms for care and technology. That care can't be automated, that care isn't a problem to solve through engineering, but it's a key human effort, and one that's very meaningful that we can supplement with technology. And that we needed to look at this global political economic scale of how we seek and provide for care in our society. So, before we get into the interactive part of this session, I would like for you all to take a moment and think about a caring interaction or a caring system that you've come up against. You can tweet it, you can write it down, but take a moment. And you can tweet it with a hashtag #WriteTheDocs. So, moving forward and making this applicable to you all, how can we better understand care in the context of documentation? So, in recent years, I've been working a lot on developer tools, and this is an area that I really enjoy. Coming from a computing background, I always enjoy working on tools that are, doing new cool things. But this is also an area I feel that I can make a fair amount of difference by working with engineers and helping to realize that not everyone is the same. I often start with text editors, like, okay, you use Emacs. Well, what keyboard shortcuts do you use? Those aren't the same as Vim keyboard shortcuts. To better understand workflows and the user experience of developer tools. And I found some anti-patterns at this intersection of care and technology around documentation with developer tools. First is this roll your own solutions. I build a tool, it works for me. Other people can use it. If it doesn't work for them, then that's not my problem. The second is the lack of dedicated resources for documentation. The third is this culture that discourages stupid questions. And the fourth is this question of who is this for, which is often very different depending on who you ask. So starting with this roll your own paradigm, it's important to ask this question: what about your users is different from you and your team? And like I said, start with the keyboard shortcuts and work from there. And when I work with developers who are building tools and then work with other developers who are potential users of this tool, one of the things that comes out time and time again is the importance of having just a coherent story around what something does and how it's supposed to work. And having that story have multiple entry points and exit points. And this is probably something that's not surprising to y'all in the documentation community. The next is something that I probably don't need to introduce to this crowd at all. It's the documentation is everybody's job, and so therefore it's nobody's job. And I'll find out, this is where I find very deep anti-patterns, such as reliance on relationships. For big companies to develop internal APIs, I'll hear that, oh, well, we know that the documentation is bad, so if I have to use it, I just find the guy who made it. I don't know how to scale that for you, sir. And then just the lack of scaffolding around documentation, which, navigation, organizing the calls on APIs so they are consistent and make sense, error messages, all of these things make a big difference in anticipating folks' needs in terms of documentation. The next, and this quote is from Coding Horror, and I used it before when I did this talk for the local meetup, but this fear of stupid questions. How is it that we can continue to improve when we're all trying to no, I'm not vulnerable. Oh, I know the answer to that. I'm not going to ask any questions like, oh, why do you want to know that? And I encounter this a lot because in my work doing user research, I ask a lot of stupid questions. And I ask them over and over again. And I do this because I'm fine with being vulnerable. And also because I want to hear how things come together in other people's minds, because that's one of the most illuminating things you can hear, is understanding other folks' mental models. And the last anti-pattern, and it's one that's so pervasive, is that oftentimes when we build developer-facing tools, the answer to the question, who is this for, it's different to every person you ask on the product team. And this is a problem, because if we don't understand who's using our tools, we can't help care for them, or we don't care for them very efficiently. So where do we go from here? Where do we go from this place of a culture that has very little respect for care, yet really relies on it? How do we make this more sustainable? This is art by Jenny Holzer. This question of everyone's work is equally important. How do we talk a lot about flattening hierarchies, but how do we build systems where care work matters as much as engineering work, and where we realize that engineering work can't happen without caring work? And how do we work from a stance that we are all trying to care for someone who's using our tool? That if we're building technology, it's to help other people. And in order to help people, we have to care for them first. And I draw a lot on feminist ethics and the ethics of care. And I also argue for engagement with users. Surprise, surprise, this is what I do for a living. But, do ethnographic user interviews, sit down with your users, be in the same room with them. Usability test the docs. I will be in the unconference room in Lola's with some of my students from UX Night School for the next couple of days. And I would love to talk to you all about your experiences usability testing the docs and how to move forward. I'm also a big advocate for participatory design strategies, where if you're going to build a tool or work on a new release, bring your stakeholders to the table, help them, have them there with you in the room. And I also think that as a whole, we need to have better organizational efforts for understanding and valuing care work, rather than seeing it as a problem to solve or make invisible. And it's funny, every time I give this talk, I find that inevitably, a white male engineering manager comes up to me afterwards. And God bless y'all, I'm happy to talk to you about care. That's a topic I'm passionate about. But they say, thank you for giving this talk. Ever since I became an engineering manager, I've just been overwhelmed with how much I have to care about other people's problems. I'm like, yeah, dude. I just talked for 20 minutes about that. Oh, so thank you. This concludes my spiel, and let's work together. We're doing UX Night School in June, both here in Portland and online, and I would love to work with you on usability testing your docs. But to spur conversation and to move forward, I would like you all at your tables and in your small groups to storyboard these caring interactions. Get out a piece of paper, appoint a sketch artist, or do this exquisite corpse style, and think about the systems and the interactions that happen around care. Did you take an airplane here? Like, what were all the technologies that led to being cared for on the airplane? Did you drop your child off at daycare on your way here? Like, what are all the technologies and systems and cultural aspects that led to that? So, without further ado, thank you, and let's start talking about caring systems.